walls, I can't take it anymore. We didn't start the fire.
Hello and welcome to Of the People Live. Thank you so much for joining us today. A world at war, a world on fire, and regime change. When you look around the world, there's conflict everywhere. Russia attacks Ukraine. Hamas attacks Israel. The Houthi rebels continue to fire missiles into the Red Sea, attacking U.S. ships, international shipping, as well as now Chinese shipping. Let's see how that goes over well with the Chinese, right? Iran continues to foment terrorism around the world. The Philippines is heading to conflict with China. And then you have Haiti, the conflict of which we bear, as the United States, a lot of responsibility for where we're at with this. Coming to your shores right soon would be my guess. Everywhere you look around the world, there is conflict. Against this backdrop, we now learn that the United States, ladies and gentlemen, has permanent troops stationed in Taiwan. Now, we support an independent Taiwan and is certainly not part of China, regardless of what China claims that it is. But we now have troops on the Chinese border, functionally speaking. I will say, though, let's be careful. Anytime the United States uses the word permanent, the Biden administration uses the word permanent, you have to sort of look at it with a jaundiced eye, because the word Afghanistan comes to mind and the abysmal withdrawal that the Biden administration, the feckless Biden administration, executed, no pun intended, in Afghanistan, leaving our friends and allies there basically hanging by a rope, right? So all of this, the world is at war, and everywhere you look, the world is at war. And then you have the United States, Senator Schumer, calling for regime change in the middle of Israel's war to defeat Hamas, right? And now we see the United Nations Security Council has just passed a resolution calling for a ceasefire in the war against Gaza. I'm sorry, the war against Hamas. They did not link it to releasing the hostages. They did not condemn Hamas for launching the war on October 7th. No, Israel is the aggressor. Israel is the oppressor nation, and Israel needs to have a ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. What they also didn't tell you is there is now a proposition that the UN's bringing forward for an arms embargo against Israel because they are committing genocide in Gaza. That's what they're saying. So the U.S.'s reaction to all of this, the Biden administration's reaction, they abstain. The ultimate act of cowardice. This is a feckless, ineffective, incompetent foreign policy. Everywhere around the world you look, the world is on fire. Now, you don't have to call it a war. Maybe it's not World War III, but it's certainly in conflict everywhere you look. And the lesson here is simple. Weakness invites aggression. It's true in the schoolyard, and it's true in international politics. It's everywhere around the world that you're looking. This is what we see here. Everywhere. The Biden administration is more concerned with currying favor with voters in Michigan, Muslim voters in Michigan, right? Let's call them what are Hamas voters, the Hamas lobby in Michigan, than they are with support defending our borders, than they are with really defending our allies in Israel. And let's not forget, you may not have heard this as recently, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was an imam, a religious cleric in Michigan named, let's see if I got this right, Abdu Zidani, I believe was the gentleman's name, who called for all Muslims to kill Jews like sheep. So number one, folks, Islamic extremism is here in this country. Number two, why that's not a hate crime, I don't know. Number three, why the FBI is investigating, I sure the hell don't know. But it shows you that the Biden administration calling for the regime change in a friendly government who's at war, on a war footing, against trying to curry favor just for re-election. It's ridiculous. If you look back at all of this, we alienated the whole Trump-Russia hoax. We alienated Russia, pushed them into China's camp. We're alienating Israel, pushing them into whoever's camp, but other than ours. And don't forget, Kamala Harris came out and said that if Israel goes into Rafah to finish the job, right, to basically eliminate Hamas, to make Israel safe so they don't have another attack, right? That's what this really is. There will be consequences, like, I guess, an arms embargo. There are two truths in politics. One is real politics, capital R, small k. An enemy of my enemy is my friend. Israel will survive. But the feckless and incompetent Biden administration policy is unforgivable. The second truth in politics, especially international politics, is that when your friends no longer trust you and your enemies no longer fear you, these are perilous times indeed. So we do agree with the Biden administration that it's time for regime change, but it's time for changing the Biden regime this November and getting some adults in the room who understand that sometimes strength has to be shown in international relations because it keeps the bullies at bay. And we are no longer going to refer to them as the Biden administration because it's really the Biden regime. And like Chuck Schumer said of Israel, the Biden regime needs to be changed. And we need some adults in the room this November. Time for regime change. And that's the monologue. Ericka, where are you?
I am right here with you, Robert. Great monologue today. I've been thinking about
change.
Yeah, the thing that you said about our enemies no longer fearing us and our allies no longer trusting us.
That's
I mean, if we can't defend our allies and democracies in the Middle East and around the world, if we can defend the Ukrainian democracy, I don't see why we can't defend the Israeli democracy. It just, the hypocrisy, the double standard, the foolishness is so on display, Robert.
I like the term Biden regime because it's really, I mean, they're almost thuggish, to be honest.
Yeah.
But look, I know we have a guest coming on and I want to properly introduce him. So Jeff Berkowitz, the political chess master, someone I have known a long time, who is one of the most insightful, smartest guys in terms of DC politics and international politics that you're going to find. He is the chairman of Delve DC, which is a competitive intelligence firm and risk analytics firm, is joining us today because there's so much to talk to him about the elections, about the convention, about what's going on around the world.
We're going to pick his brain the whole show, y'all. It's going to be fabulous.
You'll pick his brain the whole show and he'll still have a lot of brains left. So bring him on.
It. All right. Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. That's a lot of pressure, though.
So much pressure. Much.
Leave it to me to bring pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure that we introduce Jeff Berkowitz, founder, chairman of Delve, based out of DC, a competitive intelligence and risk analytics firm. And full disclosure, longtime friend, and we go back a long ways and have fought a lot of wars together. But when yours truly needs analytics analysis and needs to cut through the crap, Jeff Berkowitz is the guy I call because he's the smartest guy in the room. He just doesn't like to let you know he's the smartest guy in the room. Jeffrey, welcome to the
humility.
people.
Humility.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Enjoyed the monologue.
Well, good. Oh, you actually have to hear that. I think it's time for regime change. You know, if they can call for Netanyahu, elections in Israel when they're on a war footing. Hey, we're not on a war footing. Well, we're being invaded on the southern border. Maybe it is a war footing.
Yeah. Why don't we have the election tomorrow?
Regime change. So, but I'm glad you're with us. Listen, there's so many things to talk about, and I know, Ericka, I'm going to let you jump first because I know we were talking about this whole election, Trump versus Biden. 70% of the country wants a different candidate. You have a third party candidate, at least one. Well, you have probably three, right? You have RFK. I forget who the Green Party woman is against.
And then there's
Cornel West.
That guy.
And whatever. So help us make sense of all of this because there's questions about convention and replacing Biden. I mean, you put out something called the car crash article, which if people haven't seen it, they can go to your website, which is delvedc.com. So
yes.
What's going on in the presidential elections that we should be watching out for?
Welcome to the car crash election. We have two leaders. They each have their hand on the steering wheel and put firmly on the gas, flying down the highway, just throwing chaos left and right. And most of America is sitting in the back of the car saying, "Please stop. Can we like this Uber ride is not what we ordered. 1 star." But that's the most likely scenario. We've been saying this for well over a year. This is the base case is Trump versus Biden. There was very unlikely the way the parties are structured. It's very hard to undo to overcome an incumbent advantage, and you essentially have two incumbents on the ticket this time, which is a really interesting dynamic that we haven't seen in over 100 years, over 120 years.
When was the last time?
It was in the 1890s, and now I'm forgetting which former president ran. I think it was Harrison versus someone else. I'd have to look at it. I should have put it in my notes. But if you go to the car crash election article on our website, it goes in. It has the link. It has the details on that. But we really, in the modern era of politics, we've never seen an incumbent president versus another essentially incumbent president, and so much is priced in to people's views on these candidates. Typically, I know I was on President Bush's reelection campaign in 2004. Robert knows all about this. If you look at his playbook against Kerry, Obama's playbook against Romney, the way an incumbent wins re-election is you define the challenger before the challenger can define your time as president. People already kind of have a sense of what they think about a president. Our re-election slogan that President Bush said in every single stump speech that I heard 100+ times throughout the campaign was, "You may not always agree with me, but at least you know where I stand." Right? And it was an implicit contrast to John Kerry, who's a flip-flopper. Obama did the same sort of thing with Mitt Romney and his wealth and the private equity deals where, workers weren't always the winners in those deals, and pushed him away from those sort of swing voters. One, there's a lot less swing voters than there used to be. Two, most of them are not satisfied with the options they'll have in November. They're just going to stay home. This is going to be a nasty election campaign that is entirely focused on each party turning out their base.
So, Jeff, you said that there are less and less swing voters. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, even though fewer voters are affiliating explicitly with one of the two major parties,
right?
Voters are more and more that actually turn out. High and medium propensity voters are more likely to be among one of the tribes, right? We've become very tribal in our politics now. Less rationality. A smart person one has told me many times, people make choices with emotions and justify them with rationality. That's a great explanation of some of our politics today.
Yes.
And so most people who are actually going to turn out and vote in the election, which I think will be one of the lower turnouts in modern history, they've already made up their mind. It's really a question of how many of these folks can each side get to the polls.
That is such a good point, because this is the first time in my life where I hear everyone, right, left, and center, complaining about the government, saying that they hate the government. The people on the left, Democrats, progressives, they do not like Joe Biden. There are tons of people on the right, conservatives, they do not like Donald Trump. Everyone is unhappy that we're having a replay of 2020. Yeah,
but that's what we got. America, Hollywood has no new ideas. They just do retreads, and now they joke Washington is Hollywood for ugly people, and we're just following suit, right with Hollywood. No new ideas.
Okay, so what are we seeing as far as so you said the high propensity voters, so you think it's going to be low turnout, only like the ride or die team people are going to show up to vote. So how does that wash out in the end? What are the statistics? Oh, go ahead. No, finish.
I mean, it's going to be a
Well, let's
margin of
make-
error election.
Well, so you think it's going to be within the margin of error? Does it still turn on? I've said to people it turns on probably 7 states, right? I mean, the election is going to turn. We know the states, right? Let's count them, right? There's Georgia,
Michigan,
there's Michigan, there's
Pennsylvania.
Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Arizona, Nevada. Maybe I'm missing one somewhere, but
I mean, that's a good list.
yeah, all the other states might as well just stay home and not vote, right? I mean, because it's going to be. I mean, there's no chance of California voting red, and there's no chance of Texas or Florida voting blue. It's just not happening, right? So
That's right. Yeah, a lot of these states are fairly priced in at this point. Even Ohio, that used to be a battleground state, has become increasingly red, which is going to be interesting for the Senate race out there this year if Sherrod Brown can overcome those odds. But other than that, a lot of it's priced in, and you're seeing the Democrats understand this, and they are pulling something forward from the 04 playbook for reelection, which is ballot initiatives, right? Can you find these issue questions you can put on the ballot? They're putting a big abortion rights ballot initiative on a number of states, including Arizona, that will help drive turnout on their side. And push folks out to the polls, even if they're not thrilled with the options at the top of the ticket.
That's smart, because we both know, being creatures of habit, people come to the polls, they're going to generally either fill out, up ticket or down ticket. If they come out, if there's a passion point issue and they come to the polls, they're going to vote along the line, even though the issue that drove them may not be any of the candidates.
Yep.
That is
So here's my question. Let's now wade into the world of what ifs, right? Because there's this, the last thing I heard is that Governor Christie is the latest one to flirt with no labels possibly running. I mean, Manchin said no, Haley said no, a couple others, said no along the way. There's this whole RFK candidacy, which frankly, he's polling quite well. Look, I think the last time.
Is there a chance? Oh,
Well,
sorry, Robert.
No, this is a conversation. It's I grew up in a Jewish household. You have to interrupt this, to survive. It's just the way it is. So, but is there a chance, Jeff, that either of these candidates does not get 270 electoral votes? And obviously, how does that work when it gets kicked to the House?
Ooh, okay, hold on, Jeff. Now you're going to have to hold on to your answer, because we're going to have to hear from the defenders of American freedom first to get in our traditional plugs for our sponsors. So I'm going to give you a minute to think about it, and we'll be right back.
America came into being based on a shared belief and a common set of values. Unlike other nations that were bound together based on common ancestry, race, or caste, we came into being based on a simple and shared set of ideals. That the power of government is based on the consent of the governed. That life, the freedom to live life on our own terms in our own way, free from government interference, and liberty, our most precious value, and the pursuit of happiness, which means we are free to pursue that which we choose, with the knowledge and courage to know that nothing is guaranteed to us in this life. Those values, America was founded on these basic inalienable rights. Freedom to pray to God in our own way. Freedom to think and speak freely without fear of punishment or harm. And freedom to gather in our places of worship and in our local taverns. And freedom to defend ourselves, our families, our homes, and our neighbors as we see fit. The American Center for Education and Knowledge is dedicated to protecting American exceptionalism anywhere and everywhere it is threatened. ASIC is a 501c3 and depends on your tax-deductible donations. Please help us continue our fight.
All right, everybody, we've got Jeff Berkowitz with us today. Make sure you leave a comment wherever you're watching in case you have a question. We'll ask it. You'll get your question live on air, y'all. And just so everybody knows, I put the link to the car crash election in the comments section. So if y'all want to go check it out, go do that. Okay, now back to the question, Jeff. Can any of these third-party candidates actually do some damage?
So I'm personally waiting for the ASIC, candidate, to qualify for the ballot. But
Robert.
Look,
if I'm elected, I promise I will not serve. Right.
sounds perfect. I think the American people are okay with that. To do with some can we just have more tours through the White House and less government?
Exactly.
The high water mark for third party candidates is Ralph Nader in 1992, and he got just under 20% of the popular vote, 0 electoral college votes. So didn't really come close to winning any states. I don't think any of these candidates, third party candidates, are polling in a way that suggests they could overcome both of the major party candidates to win a state and secure electoral votes. But they can play a spoiler, and we're seeing that in the polls. No labels is in 15 states, including a couple battlegrounds like Arizona. Should they find a candidate that's appropriate? RFK is qualifying for more and more of them and starting to poll in some interesting ways. The point I always make to folks that like to play the third party game is Michael Bloomberg, who's a multi-billionaire, spent 10 years and millions upon millions of dollars with some very sharp political minds studying how do you get elected president of the United States as a third party independent candidate. And his conclusion at the end of the 10 years and millions of dollars spent was to run for the Democratic nomination.
But look, you make good sense. And obviously people remember, if you're old like me, Ross Perot. And if you're really old like me, you remember, however, George McGovern, who I believe is the last third party candidate to actually win electoral votes. And I think he won 72? I think he won 5 states and probably 49 electoral votes. So it has happened before, right? So I guess the question is, as a candidate, I mean, how many states are? Let's go through this, because you're the brain on all of this. How many states are proportional? How many are winner take all with electoral college, and how does that work?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever looked at that question. I don't know if any of them are proportional, or whether
there's a couple. I know there's a couple. Right?
Yeah, it's an interesting academic question. We tend to focus on actionable ones, but both George McGovern, particularly, and even I think you could argue Ross Perot were placed at the head of significant populist movements. I don't know who you could. Trump is more of the head of a populist movement.
I was just going to say,
right now than any of the third party candidates.
Yeah, because he's not really a Republican, and never was until he ran for the Republican nomination. At least as far as I can tell, he's a pretty liberal guy.
He is in a lot of ways, right? You have this horseshoe going on with a lot of these populist issues. We like to talk with our corporate clients about, we're sort of in the swirl of these twin tides in American politics today, populism and progressivism. And there's some significant overlap on a number of questions like trade and economics, labor, that are happening, that are features of both of those movements. And it's particularly interesting to us because if you look at some of the populist, and progressive questions, you're actually starting to see this realignment among the parties. You're seeing, non-college educated, more traditional workers move into the Republican Party versus higher educated, upper income voters move more into the Democratic Party, and Trump has been a feature of that realignment and helped accelerate.
I think we're going to talk about this in the after hours, so I'm giving away the game a little bit, but it's interesting to see how there are a lot of folks who are more liberally minded generally speaking. And when I say liberally minded, I mean in the traditional sense. They just want to be left alone. You know, they want there to be some kind of a social safety net for grandma or the orphans or whatever, but they just want to be left alone. And so then it's interesting to see then how different demographics end up choosing who will represent them in government. It's like, okay, well, we agree that the government kind of sucks and that people are whatever. So why do you pick the team that wants more of your stuff and feels like it has control, it can control your life and tell you what to do? And I think that's what I think the Democratic Party has become so overtaken by the left wing and that thumb on the, you know, the proverbial boot on the neck that they're
Thank you, James Carville.
yeah, exactly. Like that now people are rejecting it. Like it's just gone so far that people are like, ugh, and they're rejecting it. But they're not conservative either. So
right.
and so like they're kind of people are leaning toward the Republican Party where they wouldn't normally.
So Jeff, explain to me something though about this realignment, right? I mean, obviously, the pillars of the Democratic Party, at least as I always understood them to be, in no particular order, are the union vote, right? The women's vote, the black vote, right? And I say teachers, union, which is still union, but I sort of differentiate that a little bit, right? So it's 3 or 4 pillars. Aren't we really seeing alignment? I would realignment, maybe not a majority within the black community. I mean, polls indicate, right? You never know until it's over. But I mean, are you seeing any of that kind of realignment?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely, it would surprise people to know that Donald Trump, given the way the media was reporting it, actually increased his share of the African American vote and definitely the Hispanic vote in the 2020 election compared to the 2016 election. And the polling indicates that he's making some inroads there in the Republican Party, is particularly among African American men. And if you look at private sector union workers, there's a much more openness and comfortability with the Republican Party than there was, some time ago. Teachers and more traditional public employee unions are always going to be a part of the Democratic Party, but traditional private sector union workers, that's far less true, right? If you're an auto worker, they want you and your brethren to have a lot fewer jobs, right? That and shift the economics of your industry for to move from internal combustion engine cars to electric vehicles. If you're an IBEW worker and you make your bread and butter is building pipelines, putting up transmission lines, making energy infrastructure happen. Like the Democratic Party is in bed with environmentalists that make you sit on the sidelines waiting years to get to work on projects. I mean, you can just go down the list of, and then you get into all those social questions. That's not where a lot of those traditional constituencies of the Democratic Party are. So they're looking for a new home. At the same time, among Republican, college-educated, upper middle class Republicans, the sort of the country club Republicans, as it were, you're feeling less and less.
The Rockefeller Republicans.
What's that?
The old Rockefeller Republicans.
The Rockefeller Republicans and that sort of base, are don't like being tutted at the club by for supporting Trump. Of course, I'm old enough and you're old enough to remember when the same crowd was upset about the way President Bush spoke in public, and I remember people saying, couldn't he just say nuclear correctly? And I was like, but every time he says it the way he does, his poll numbers go up.
We say, Mr. President, could you tell us where there's an R in the word Washington, right? Because you used to say Washington too. So, back in the day. But listen, we have a question coming in, and I want to throw this out there. Let's assume that neither candidate gets to 270.
Yeah.
Roll the tape on this one.
What happens?
What happens?
The Supreme Court, the evil Supreme Court.
Stop. No, it doesn't quite get there yet.
If you have certified electors in which there's a situation in which neither candidate has 200. So the only way that happens is if there's a third party candidate that gets some number, right? So you'd have to figure out. But if you get into that situation, then you're going to the House of Representatives, and each congressional delegation is voting, based on their numbers. And generally speaking, Republicans control more state delegations than Democrats do. So presuming that's the case with the newly elected House of Representatives that's seated on January 3rd of next year, then you're likely to see a Republican, the Republican candidate Donald Trump elected by the House.
So that sounds terrifying. So basically, we could have an election in November and not know until January who the president is. And then it's dependent on whoever got elected to the House of Representatives.
Some of which may also still be playing out in those months, because a lot of those elections are going to be very close. There's states, like California, that take a long time to count. You only have so many hands, and even if you take off your shoes to use toes, it's tough for some of those elected officials. Those poll workers to get the count right. You also
in the last election,
more states doing more mail-in ballots, and you have to wait for those to kind of come in and get processed. And then you're going to have recounts and close elections, and somebody's not going to make it to January because we last cycle.
And then
died,
and then whoever loses is going to be like, bruh, it was a scam, and then they're going to like contest it or whatever. And so, what is the worst case scenario? So
you're getting towards it.
I mean, because we're pretty divided. That's what my question is, because we're basically 50-50 in the House right now. And, there are plenty of Republicans who are happy to switch to the other side regardless of the outcome, right? There's probably plenty of Republicans in the House who hate Donald Trump so much or politically feel like it will be a better whatever. So, I mean, I feel like what you just said is the election is a coin toss. Yes. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah.
Or it could come down to essentially a coin toss.
It could very easily. It's going to come down to, look, the last, you're talking about tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of votes across, tens of millions of voters, in a handful of the states that Robert named earlier that are going to actually determine the outcome of this election. And then the question becomes, how willing are people to accept those results? In 2020, there's no denying that Democrats undertook a systematic process to open up the way we proceeded with voting.
Correct.
And there's a lot of questions about whether that was done in a responsible way. And I think if you do the final analysis, it's hard to get to the delta you need to say that means Donald Trump lost. But you also had Donald Trump had an advantage that no Republican presidential candidate had since Ronald Reagan, which was the RNC was fully able to engage in election day operations, meaning able to work at the polls and ensure ballot security. And his RNC under Ron McDaniel was wholly unprepared for the task.
Well, and you do know that with the new regime at the RNC and a mutual friend of ours who has been brought aboard to ensure election integrity, I feel a whole lot better going into this because if anybody can right that ship, I think he can in terms of ensuring election or making a greater effort towards ensuring election integrity. But let's go back to that a second.
Further, I want to just really quick, everybody who's listening right now, that means you. That means the RNC is depending on you to volunteer to be a poll worker, to be a counter, to volunteer at your voting place, to help ensure that we have free and fair elections. We count on you. It's up to you, literally, the listener, not just us, not just the RNC, but you to make sure we have free and fair elections. Okay, that's my lecture for the day.
Do you feel better now? Do you feel better now? You got that out?
A little
Okay.
bit.
It is all, after all, this show, we call this Of the People, but it's really about making you feel better. So
It is. It is. I'm a woman, therefore it's all about me.
Sexism. Here we go.
But for now, Jeff, we'll let it be about you for like a
Exactly.
few more minutes.
So, Jeff, let's talk a little bit about election integrity. I know you've done a bunch of research on the 2020 election. I don't want to put you on the spot as to what you think, but what are some things that you found in sort of researching the results, the methodologies of the 2020 election that most people aren't aware of?
Well, you had a large opening of ballot harvesting and mail-in balloting that was largely unregulated. You had a lot of flexibilities brought in. You can argue about whether these were appropriate given the pandemic and the emergency that we were in and all the rest of that. But it definitely changed the rules. The Democratic Party pushed forward a lot of those rules, and they were prepared to take advantage of the new rules of the game. And the Republican Party was focused on raising complaints and concerns, but not in a systematic way that actually could maintain integrity, just causing noise, which had the net effect of discouraging some of our people to turn out because they lost confidence in the election. We've got to. Politics is about the rules, right? We were talking, we were in the run up to this, recording this conversation about the rules of the convention and how they work for candidates and nominating them and vacancies and all that. Every election has rules. Every game has rules. Government has rules. You've got to know those rules and how they work, and how do you then leverage those rules to take advantage of them. And the Republican Party in 2020 just didn't focus on that question and take advantage of it. Now they're trying to get better about turning out our folks are traditional Americans. They like showing up at the polls on election day, getting their little sticker. They don't like, that's what I like doing when I'm not traveling for election day. We need to convince more of them to mail it, get your vote in early, make things happen, make sure that your vote counts early if you're going to help drive more turnout. The more we get the people we know are going to vote, get their ballots in the mail or in early voting, the more the party can focus on the lower propensity voters, getting them out on election day.
Oh, I love that. See, this is the thing. It's great to have values and norms and traditions, but it doesn't matter if you're going to lose.
And that's all about get out the vote. GOTV. That's it.
I mean, be strategic, for God's sake. Stop trying to be cute. Like, I get it. I want it to be a traditional way, and I want it to be like it was.
Cute? Wait, I'm not cute? I thought I was cute.
But that's like,
Sorry.
Just get. No, I really, it was one of the things that being involved in party politics was the most infuriating to me. People would cut off their nose to spite their face. And I don't get it. I don't see the Democrats doing that.
Well, they're much more disciplined because I think ultimately they're in the minority. They had to be disciplined to be as effective. And I think in 2004, Jeff, you and I talk about the book, The Blueprint, and, while we were all working to get Bush reelected in 2004, I think the Democrats in Colorado learned a formula that they have now replicated nationwide. And I think I think that the Republicans are still good at a circular firing squad. I can tell you in 2004, when I ran the Jewish outreach for the president's reelect under the auspices of RPOF, I butt heads with so many people in our party who were not in it for the right reason, or who were just stuck on not doing the right thing for the right reason. Ultimately, I think the results were good. But look, politics is about ego if it's about anything. And if you want friends in politics, buy a dog, as I've always said. It's just one of those things. So, Jeff, can you stay with us one more segment? I know we have to go to break and we have to earn some money.
Yes.
So I can stick around.
Because I want to shift to international politics.
Ooh. Ooh, dun,
Which
dun,
because
dun.
I know that Delve is international in its reach now. So I know that you work around the world with different, let's say, peoples, countries, corporations, that kind of thing.
Ooh, well then this will be a great segue. We're gonna hear about socialism, and I'm curious if you're gonna be dealing with that internationally.
Socialism. The goal of socialism is communism. The world is quite familiar with socialism and the horrors socialism has brought with it. It wasn't that long ago. Actually, it's still with us. Socialism creeps into government slowly until it's too late. Socialism, the big lie. Yes, it could happen anywhere. This educational video was brought to you by the American Center for Education and Knowledge and paid for by people like you who care about the future of our democracy. Please help us continue our work educating the American public and consider supporting ASIC by making a tax-deductible donation at asicfund.org. Hi, I'm Robert Chernin.
And I'm Ericka RedicX.
And we are Of the People. Join us on WUVR 1490 on your AM dial. That's Thursdays 9 a.m., Saturdays 3 p.m., and
WNTK 99.7 FM.
And if you can't find either of those, you can find us on Rumble.
That's right.
Listen in.
All right, international politics. That's our next section with Mr. Jeff Berkowitz of Delve. Learn us some
Founder
stuff,
and
Jeff.
chairman.
Come on.
So Jeff, I want to turn towards the Middle East, a subject near and dear to both our hearts. So a mutual friend of ours just came back from a week in Israel, and her reaction was that Israel, notwithstanding Senator Schumer calling for regime change in Israel, that the Israelis are united and as a country has never been. They've put their differences aside in fighting this war. And that message is not getting into the U.S. press or getting into the American household because it's being portrayed as warmonger, genocide, divided country. And that was the rationale, apparently, that Senator Schumer put out there as to why there needed to be regime change in Israel. What are you seeing on the ground there that maybe is not getting reported in the press?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had the opportunity to go to Israel since October 7th, but certainly talking with folks who are there, both in and outside of government, and I don't think that the vast majority of Israelis are focused on politics. Right now, they're focused on survival. And I think the clarifying moment that Israel had on October 7th is apparently lost on Senator Schumer. They are in a real war for their existential survival, and they understand that. And they need to make sure that there is not another attack like there was on October 7th. And I think they have no interest in focusing on politics and who having yet another election like they had so many of in the year or two leading up to October 7th. That they don't want to focus on that right now. They want to focus on victory and survival, and I think that's pretty broad opinion that I've heard across political perspectives there.
Mm.
And domestically, what are you seeing? Because I know that there's certain Jewish organizations, if not now, when there's another one. I forget, Jews for Peace now or something.
Jewish Voices for Peace.
Jewish Voices for Peace. There's almost been sort of a moment of cognitive dissonance within, let's call it the liberal Jewish community within this country, who was the vanguard of what I like to say are the social justice movements and Black Lives Matter, only to find out that these groups that they have supported have been basically anti-Semitic, certainly on a root level and now sort of on an overt level, but yet you still have significant amount of the Jewish community who see Israel as, for lack of a better term, an oppressor nation, right? They're an apartheid nation, they're an oppressor, all of which is total crap. But, it's almost, it's the question, it's the inevitable question I get when I'm in a room, we have a serious conversation with people is, why are Jews so liberal? Meaning, right? Why do they vote against their self-interest?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I've had so many quick discussions on that question. It's almost Talmudic at this point.
The Talmud by Jeff. I'm good with that. Okay.
Yeah. And this is an issue that we work on. You know, we work with a number of organizations that have been combating anti-Semitism, you know, on campus and in communities in this country for a number of years. And you know, it's a bizarre reality that a lot of the folks that we're confronting are themselves Jewish. And it's, you know, it's this bizarre sort of guilt. I think it's a minority viewpoint within our community, but I think today's modern anti-Semitism is largely cloaked in the language and concepts of progressivism and inclusion, which is bizarre and insane because it's a very hateful, ancient ideology of Jew hatred, but it's mostly a feature of the left today. There's certainly, you know, your traditional sort of white supremacists and you know, right-wing anti-Semitism out there. It's mostly outside the bounds of mainstream. A large portion of the Democratic Party, including the current occupant of the White House, believe that they have to address a constituency on the left that hates Israel and does not support making communities and campuses in America safe places for Jews either. And you know, Jews have tended in this country to vote more liberally and for Democrats, and they view themselves as being part of this inclusive, you know, movement for more inclusivity. And some of them are awakening to the fact that they're not welcome, and some aren't. And we'll see how that all plays out. I wish more would wake up more quickly, but I think you saw a significant uptick after October 7th of folks realizing, wait a minute, I've marched with you, you know, after George Floyd, I marched with you, you know, for Pride, I marched with you for all, you know, for immigration, all these causes, and now when it's time to stand with me and my people's time of existential, you know, threat, you're marching against me. I think it's awoken a number of folks to that reality. Still a lot more to go, though.
I think you really nailed it on the head. In so many areas of American life, it's not until something like this happens, something bad, that you realize who your allies are and what things are really about. You know, people usually trust the government until the government, you know, takes your money, takes your land, does something to you. People trust.
Wait, not these people.
No, but
no, excuse me. Haven't you written a book about that?
Yeah, it's called Reasons to Trust the Government. Spoiler alert, it's blank. But I was more on the left until I started having experiences, right? Oh, I started my own business. I had to pay my own taxes. I bought a house. I saw the city screwing me over with stupid laws. Then the media lied about the southern border, which I knew perfectly well was an absolute human rights atrocity long before Donald Trump came down the golden escalator. You know, so I like seeing the media just outright lie to people. So it usually takes some triggering event for somebody who's more liberal or on the left to kind of go, oh, I'm actually kind of on my own, or I'm going to have to actually go find my own actual tribe of people that I can trust. Not.
Well, we have 10 or 12 tribes. You can join one of them depending on who's counting, right? So, you know, it's okay. But,
I'm on I'm in Benjamin.
If you want to join a tribe, I mean, you know, we're all about tribes, so that works. So,
well, you know, it was Irving Kristol, the famous neoconservative, that said, a conservative is a liberal mugged by reality.
So, yeah,
literally.
And Winston Churchill said that if you're not a liberal in your youth, you have no heart, and if you're not a conservative as you get older, you have no brains. So it's just. But listen.
So does that
ladies and
mean Joe
gentlemen,
Biden has no brains? I'm sorry. Wait, what? Wait,
Yeah,
what was that?
He would be like the scarecrow, right? Exactly. But so listen, I need to segue, ladies and gentlemen. We've been talking all show. It's been great with Jeff Berkowitz, the founder and CEO of Delve, a risk management, international intelligence, competitive intelligence. Jeff, first of all, thank you for being our guest. I hope you'll come back. But where can people find you? On the web, on LinkedIn?
Yes.
You know, where can they find you? Because I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions.
I'm glad you clarified that you meant sort of on the internet, because I was like, I don't want anyone to find me. But so we're at delvedc.com. If you're interested in energy issues, you can also find us at delve.energy. We're covering all of the debates around the energy transition that folks are trying to push around the country. And we're mostly active on LinkedIn, although I do think we have a Twitter as well. But we try and keep our discourse thoughtful. So LinkedIn has always been our best platform.
Right. Fantastic.
So if you just search Delve LLC on there, you'll find us and some of the stuff we're posting.
So not inflammatory like Ericka and I tend to be.
Correct.
Hey.
We're inflammatory, but only if you really think about what we're saying.
Okay, so Jeff, before we close today, my question that I had to ask, what's going to be the October surprise this year? Okay, 2020, the October surprise got suppressed by Twitter, right? Got suppressed by all the socials. So hopefully we won't have that happen.
The 2020 surprise was the Hunter Biden laptop?
Correct. So that was the Hunter Biden laptop was the October surprise. It got totally suppressed. Do you have any guesses? What should we be listening for? Give us some tea to spill.
Well, if it's an October surprise in that sort of traditional sense, like the Hunter Biden laptop should have been, it's going to be everyone's in their own media caves. Okay. And it's not even a red and blue media caves. They're like 5 or 6. Axios just had a great article on this yesterday. Jim Vandehei and Mike Allen on sort of the 12 camps of different echo chambers that exist today. So it's very hard to have that sort of a traditional October surprise because it doesn't break. It's hard to break through people's tribal instincts. So I think you're really left with a black or at least gray swan type event, right? You war, conflict. The Middle East could become more inflamed in significant ways. Asia, you mentioned earlier in the show about U.S. troops in Taiwan doing training and advisory work. China could get more adventurous in the South China Sea. Latin America, our Joe Biden's good friend, Maduro down there, or not. He's looking at invading Guyana.
Yep.
To take their oil assets. That could be very disruptive to the energy markets. And that gets us to that sort of next bucket, which is the economy. If inflation keeps going up, if we finally admit that the real country is really in a recession and it has been for some time, if you look at the private markets versus the public markets, that's mostly based on what's going on with the tech stocks. That could, and you have some big layoffs, that could be a big impactful event. And then candidate health. If one of these candidates has an episode, ends up in the hospital, and God forbid, you wish everyone well, or worse, that could certainly be a disruptive event. But I think the sort of traditional kind of gotcha opposition research type things, it's going to get stuck in an echo chamber and have marginal impact outside of it.
That is fascinating, Jeff.
I think the Black Swan event or the Gray Swan event in October is going to be they're going to release Joe Biden's IQ test, right? And I'm hearkening back to that commercial in the 80s when he ran about my IQ's better than you. He did it in New Hampshire, by the way, where I am. The one that he got called out by Sam Donaldson and the other reporters. I finished, I had 3 degrees, top of my class, and my IQ's better than you.
Yeah, all lies.
This is IQ test.
All lies. So. Well, and this is what can you imagine? This is what is so funny to me too. When was the last time? And now I know everybody picked on Ronald Reagan for his age, but like legitimately, both of our leading presidential candidates are octogenarians. That's the best we've got. Really?
Well,
They could plot at any minute.
Yeah, technically, Trump is still a septuagenarian.
But he won't be by the time he leaves office.
This is true.
If he makes it. Oh my God. When has the vice presidential pick ever been this important? Like for real. For real. When was the last time the vice presidential pick actually mattered this much?
Well, wait a minute. You should really be asking Jeff, who's the vice presidential pick for Trump? Because if anyone would know, my guess is Jeff will.
Ooh.
I don't think even Trump knows. So, look, I think that could also be an interesting, not necessarily October surprise, but I remember if you look at 08, McCain's pick of Palin and he was sort of, that was an age was something of a concern in that election, was a huge turning point in the election. Not in a good way for John.
Not in a good way.
Well, it wasn't. Ultimately, it wasn't because the pitch that the Obama folks were making against McCain was that he was erratic and couldn't be trusted, and that was their effort to overcome the experience gap. And I remember having a conversation after, years after the election with David Plouffe, who ran the campaign. They said we couldn't get any traction on that argument until he picked Palin, and it was so erratic and out of nowhere, and her credentials seemed like she was a mayor. It was just it made people a lot more open to that messaging, and was ultimately his downfall. Now, I will say, from a turning out the base perspective, anybody who was working in campaign offices across the country saw an immediate uptick of people actually wanting campaign signs, and there was some energy and momentum after that pick. But it was insufficient to win the election, as we saw.
And you're right; it does confirm choices. I still remember in 2012 when Obama was running against Romney, and they were trying to paint him as sort of a silver-spooned Wall Street guy. And they are at the debates, and Mitt Romney reaches over and says, "I'll bet you $10,000." Instant crystallization of the ether of out of touch silver spoon guy, right? I'll bet you because Americans don't bet $10,000.
No.
Maybe they'll bet $1,
$100.
Gentleman's bet. If you go to your bookie, maybe you're spending $500 on the spread for the Steelers or the whatever. I'll bet you $10,000.
Wow.
So
that is so crazy. And the Howard Dean, the scream. Okay. This is our last question, Jeff. It is fascinating to me that some of those things.
Keeping them overtime. I just want you to know.
No, we've got 2 minutes left. I'm watching the clock.
Just stay and do overtime.
Oh, I'm watching the clock. Stupid stuff like that tanks campaigns.
When you're running a campaign, you're trying to build a template of perceptions, both positive for your candidate and negative for your opponent, right? It's all about contrast.
Yeah.
And if you do your homework right on who you're running against and you understand your own vulnerabilities, you're structuring that in a way that people's natural disposition will come out, right? We knew that Howard Dean had an anger management problem, right? It was literally the cover. I have it somewhere. The cover of the opposition research book we had on him at the RNC at the time was, Howard Dean anger management. And then, you get the scream, and it fulfills that prophecy. John Kerry did the same thing. He was a flip-flopper, and he stands in front of a West Virginia veterans town hall and answers a question about the Iraq war and providing the resources for our troops by explaining he actually did vote for the money before he voted against it.
I was for it.
Which is only a coherent statement in the confines of the Senate chamber.
Right. And I remember in 2004, we found a video of him windsurfing, right? And, the windsurf, you go this way with the wind and then you go that way with the wind. So we had that plastered all over Florida I was for it before I was against it with the windsurfer going back and forth. So
That's
Picture
terrible.
is still worth 1,000
That
words.
is so terrible.
Google Bush Cheney windsurfing ad. It's still on YouTube. I send that link out at least once a month.
Well, and as time goes on and we get closer to the election, y'all need to go to delvedc.com, be reading up on what they've got to say, read their commentary,
Sign up for their newsletter.
sign up for the newsletter. Thank you again, Jeff, for being with us.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.
Start